And here we are again. The subject for Badiou. What does he mean by subject? In Badiou, the key words he uses are very common words, and you shouldn't let yourself be deceived by the fact that they mean what they usually mean. Generally, it's not. Badiou's vocabulary is very rich, original, and it requires an effort to understand what is exactly mean by that word. The good side of it is that once you understand what's the meaning of that word is, you gained a little step ahead, a little piece more in the understanding of Badiou's theory. The subject for Badiou is a very specific term, and it's and the description of what the subject is the main topic on his theory of the subject, and is on a finally objectless subject. In these works, Badiou, we are talking about 1982, although the theory of the subject has been translated in English in 2009. In the theory of the subject, he is in dialogue with the philosophical tradition. And he discusses the philosophical tradition and saying that the subject cannot be flattened to a substance. The subject is not a zoon politikon, as Aristotle, for example, was saying, and Marx developed in his Grundrisse. The subject is not a human animal. First of all, because a human being is something more complex than a bundle of his or her primal needs. A human being is an interconnected social body, and the subject is not necessarily an interconnected social body. It doesn't equate to this kind of political body. The subject is not a function as well. In this sense, Badiou is in polemic with Descartes. Res extensa and res cogitans can't be two categories that we can apply on subjectivity, because the subject is not a function but an operation. And an operation is, again, a very specific word in Badiou, which we might translate with truth functioning. The operation is this way through which the subject brings the truth to its form, and the operation is the subject, but the subject is not the human being, in the sense that the existence of the operation is not necessarily embedded in the simple existence of a human being. So, a subject is not an a priori of experience, because the subject is not a condition of possibility of experience. We need a human being maybe to have an experience of something, but not necessarily an operation in order to have experience. And in this sense, he is in dialogue with Kantian and empirical tradition. In dialogue with postmodern tradition, he says that the subject is not an illusion, meaning that the subjectivity is not that goes in the machine that drives the body in a way that escapes our understanding. Subjectivity is an operation, and not necessarily this operation can be activated in a human life. It's something certainly existent that we can certainly prove through the revolutions that happened in the history of humanity, but not necessarily is comparable to the human existence. So, what is the subject? How can we define it? In page 27 of is on a finally objectless subject, Badiou defines subjectivity as a local status of procedure, a configuration that exceeds the situation. Beautiful is to see how the term locus remain. The term locus is a term that we found in Stoicism as well. The subject is not the same as the logos. Is not the fate, is not this vital force that keeps the cosmos, the universe together and in harmony. The subject is a locus. It's a place that hosts the revelation that is can configure, that can express itself. So the subject is a local status of a procedure, of a configuration, of this demand that impinges upon us in order to become a truth. And this pressure is the exceeds of this emergence. So the subject, he says again in on a finally objectless subject, is the metonymy of the situation's very being. And again, situation is a very precise word I'm going to describe now. What is a situation? Let's use an example in order to explain this word. I'll use the example that Besana used and Badiou used. Being a politician doesn't mean that this politician is a subject. Being a student does not imply that that the student is a subject, and so forth. Why? Because being both a politician and a student are objects of their environment. Hence the title, finally an objectless subject. Well, I made it more like an exclamation here, but being an objectless subject means being a subject that is not determined by the object. I am a politician if I comply to these tasks. I am a teacher if I do this, and that. I am a subject if I use this organism of mine, if I use my being as a procedure to bring the truth to appearance, to manifestation, if I hear this demand and I transform it into a form. So the situation is the exceedance of the event. The situation is all that is beyond the event, all that is beyond this becoming one. The situation is what suitors this being with the multiplicity of this demand that we can't see yet. So the event in which the situation shows up and the subject shows up as truth, as one with the truth, is this situation in which the excess stems the subject or the truth. So the truth comes up and the subject is a procedure, is an operational concept in order to bring the truth to reality. That's why we were saying before that subject and truth are connected with each other as an absolute, because they are one together and absolutely connected to the being. And the event this being comes from nothing, in the sense that the event is the one-ification, we might say, the manifestation of the being during its procedure. Why? Because when an event is happening, we don't know that this event is taking place. Let's consider, I don't know, the example of Rosa Parker and the way in which she began the fight for human rights for African Americans. More than an event, that in that moment it was a problem to which she reacted, and this reaction brought to manifestation a truth that before was just a building up of problems. So the event generally doesn't exist, is indicated as a problem, which is human rights, weather, pollution, and so on and so on. It's only in retrospect that we point to that event, and he appears to be. It is that one from which the condition of truth emerged. Whether it's love, my husband left me, and from there I realized something. But until that moment, nothing happened. There were any signs. It was just life, a number of problems that I was coping with. So the event is the moment from which the truth is brought to existence, and I start my counting. And how can this truth become? Through an act of fidelity, through my faith in being able to reorganize the elements of this event in another legitimacy. So fidelity is a mode of rootedness. It's the decision through which I decide to incorporate myself to that event and become the procedure for the truth. And the content of my faith is that I can reorganize these elements in another legitimacy. Being and Event, page 238. So the subject is the local configuration of this generic procedure from which a truth is supported. And it's from this subjectivity that institutions come. I can reorganize this truthfulness in a way that can persist. Now, the topic of the next and last video on Badiou would be focused on what are the elements to which the subject is connected. I mean, the subject as a procedural operation for the truth is exposed to basically two things. And nothing and multiplicity, void and multiplicity. So in the next video, which is based on being and event, we'll discuss what these two concepts are for Badiou and how they relate to Badiou ontology. So we'll be focused on being and event.